Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'll start by acknowledging that it's such a positive buzz in the room as we take another positive, purposeful step forward on this important project here we have before us. So I thank staff and council for being here as well as the rest. So I'll call the meeting to order, and Councillor Bean and Councillor Henderson provide their regrets. Let's begin with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Stratford is positioned on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral and Wandering peoples. As we gather, we are reminded that the city of Stratford is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples today. We acknowledge that Stratford is situated on land that was shared between the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral and the Wandering peoples. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live, work, and play on this land. If we could just take a moment of silent reflection, just to reflect about the things that have come before us and what we're about to undertake today. Thank you. Please allow me to read the Respecting Stratford statement. The Corporation of the City of Stratford is committed to providing quality service to all members of the public, council, and our employees. Our goal is to promote a safe, healthy, respectful, inclusive, and positive environment. We have a responsibility to treat people with respect by creating safe and respectful spaces. It is the city's expectation that all present will be respectful. And Madam Clerk, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Through your worship. Item 2 is declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations, and if so, please state the general nature thereof?
None noted.
Item 3 was adjournment to committee of the whole, but it's been requested that a motion be made to move item 3 and 4 to the end of the agenda so that the presentations can be heard first. So we would be looking for a motion to reorder the agenda to move item 3 and 4 to the end.
Thank you. Councilor Burback will move that, second by Councilor McCain. Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, opinion, that's unanimous and carried.
Moving to item 5, Grand Trunk Renewal Project, workshop number 2. I'll turn it over to our Chief Administrative Officer.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, council. Thank you, public that's here and those watching. I'm going to do most of the speaking today, but the intent, hopefully, is that I'm not speaking so much as you're asking questions, council. Really, this is for you to again provide you some information, but you to ask questions as we go along in this process. So I think there'll be a PowerPoint presentation coming up here in a second. Perfect. Okay. So the intent today is really, this is the agenda we have that was in your agenda package today. We're going to talk a little bit about some history, going backwards a little bit of how we got here. We're going to talk about the shared facility piece, and we'll have some guest speakers speak about that, the library and the YMCA, speak on that front. And we're going to talk about, we have some costings in front of you. Unfortunately, we only have a draft report right now in front of us, so I've taken some snippets and we'll talk about that today. A full report will be coming forward over the next couple of weeks. And whether or not we need to dive into that full report at, say, the next workshop, or it's just, again, backup information that you have from the Stratford and a lot of their partners that have created, we can decide on that moving forward. And then I'll close off by showing you what we expect for workshop number 3 and where we're going to be going with workshop number 3. And again, obviously council's opinion as to whether that is what you need to see or if there's things we need to add to workshop number 3 to kind of make this process continue forward. The intent here today, again, we are not making any decisions today. The intent of these workshops were to provide information for council, have some back and forth, and really help you gain all the information that you require for when we are making the decisions. And as we see as we go through the agenda, the decision-making time will probably around the end of April. That's kind of what we have scheduled at this point in time, around next steps. So again, last workshop was really about what's processes, not really about the grand trunk, but what processes look like when we want to put land, municipal land out to market, how to get the best value for money, what those processes look like. We talked a little bit about environmental, and all of those things. Today we're going to talk about more site specific, a little bit and get into that. Workshop 3 I have up here, we'll talk a little bit more about this, is whether or not we have some delegations come forward, whether or not the big piece of workshop 3 will be the financing side of things. Is we're going to talk a little bit about costs today. Workshop 3, we're going to talk about the finances on what we can afford, what the revenue sources might look like, what funding opportunities might look like. So that's what workshop 3 is going to be about. And then, of course, if things all work out, we bring forward our recommendations, and council has a chance to make decisions at the April 27th meeting. We'll talk about that then, thinking whether that timeline works or it needs to be tweaked one way or the other. And then, as the last piece says here, we'll talk about whether or not there's things we need to add to this schedule that will help you make those decisions moving forward. But I think you'll find today fairly wholesome, the next meeting fairly wholesome, and provide you as much information to make the best decision we can as we move forward. So, as everybody in the room knows, this project has been going on for quite some time. Back in history, first decisions were made on the expropriation of lands around 2006. The formal expropriation process started in 2009, and we received formal minutes of settlement in 2023 in order to actually, in essence, end the expropriation. There is still one outstanding appeal out there in regards to that. But again, it has been a much longer process than anybody would have ever anticipated from that legal standpoint, from that actual land acquisition standpoint. That doesn't mean the city has kind of stood still over that time. And again, it's important to note some of these achievements that we've done and how important they've been to our community. And parking is the first one to start. I'll talk more about parking in a second. But the parking at the Cooper site, even though it is free from a financial perspective, is very important connection to the downtown Stratford. Without that free parking for a lot of our business owners or business employees, would certainly put quite the detriment on our parking downtown, with people we basically want to turn on. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Starting in 2009, of course. We had the agreement with the university started in 2009, 2010. There's a couple of agreements there for the university building, and that went up in 2010. Started being used, I believe, in 2013 or 14, formally with the students. And again, that led to further investment. The city invested $10 million. That led to a $10 million provincial investment, led to other investments as well, and obviously that economic spin-off for the university operating over the last number of years. And then in 2018, we did our master plan, which has also led to where the ad hoc committee has done their work over the last couple of years and been kind of that cornerstone. It's been tweaked and shaped a little bit, and then leading more recently to the vision that the ad hoc committee brought forward to council in 2024. That council is proving we're going to look at that vision a little bit today as well, and make sure that council continues to be on board with what that vision looks like for the site as we move forward. So I'll touch base on most of these things. I guess I didn't touch on that on Transit Hub a little bit. I don't have a slide for it. But again, another piece where one of the things we talked about a little bit at the last workshop was this community benefit side. And municipalities don't do things to make money, but we do things is to provide a community and the community benefit. And from those community benefits, creates residential, commercial, industrial, and that's really what brings up the revenue sources, not necessarily direct or indirect through tax base, but really about community benefit. And the transit hub is one of those examples, right? If we weren't able to move the transit hub over to the site where it is now, that wouldn't have allowed for the redevelopment of Market Square, which again has value in what we've done with the Market Square. So again, we haven't monetized those type of things, and the same as the parking. We haven't monetized those necessarily, but we do agree that there's benefit in doing those things, regardless of whether there's finance or direct returns. So I lost my control. So let's start with the historical investment. Obviously, this has been talked about quite a bit. I apologize. In the package, there was errors on the spreadsheet that we provided. The revised numbers are going to be, I'll just skip this one, are here $28.7 million over the last, well, since 2009. And as you can see, the majority of that is in legal and expropriation of the lands. And then consulting, which is partly from the legal aspects, partly from the development of the site and extract. It's from that perspective, obviously some work that we do on the site on an ongoing basis. And then obviously the $10 million, which was actually a grant for a gift to the university for the building that you see there now today. So that's the history of what the site investment has been in thus far. This does not include our investment into the transit hub. So that was funded through. We got an extra grant of $500,000 from, I believe it was the province, could have been the feds, and then we used some of our provincial gas tax funding and some reserves to fund the rest of the funding. That's not included in this or revenue sources. This has been on our website. We just updated this for this purpose. It was on our website since I think 2022, 2023 currently. And we've updated, so we'll post this on our website as we go forward, and we'll make sure the new these numbers are reflected in here. I just want to make sure we clarify what that historical investment we chatted a lot about lately. I want to make sure we put that out there. The revised numbers. Going back to parking. So I think it's important. A couple of things. It's important to recognize that parking at the site right now is a huge benefit to the parking structure we have in downtown. Even though it's free, can we monetize that parking that's there yet? Maybe in some form or fashion, but we need to be careful on how you monetize that. Because right now, I'll use me as an example. If I park at Cooper site for free, and I was get charged $6 to $8, $10 a day to park there, then why wouldn't I park in front of City Hall versus forever? Which is what we don't want. Because if we take those 300 spots that are used by employees there every day now, and we put those in the downtown core, that will certainly eat up a lot of our free spaces that are there for people that come down, visit, shop, use our businesses, use our services. So it's a delicate balance on what you can do from that perspective. Having said all of that, depending on what we do with that site and what the needs of the parking there are, maybe there's ways to monetize that. Number two is there may be ways to monetize it in such a way that doesn't impact the downtown core. And again, maybe lower rates. Maybe there's ways that we could look at providing those that work downtown some sort of cheaper rate for parking there, et cetera. Those type of things. And that's what we're going to look at with the 2026 parking study. We're going to make sure when we do our parking study for the downtown, we're going to look at that site as well to make sure that there's some ways that we can monetize that, but do it in such a way that doesn't impact our core downtown and what happens from an economic impact there. The other piece that is important around parking is it can be a moneymaker for a municipality. Technically speaking, the Municipal Act doesn't allow us to make money on any of the fees and charges we charge. It needs to pay for that service. And there's ways to make sure that the property pays for that service. For example, parking should probably rent some of those lands that are there now that would be used as part of the whole parking structure. But overall, parking can't be a surplus or can't be a profit center. Nor can water, nor can wastewater. It's supposed to pay for the services we have. And that's the way municipalities operate, and that's the way we select this district. So I just want to put that out there. And again, that the city charges for parking not to make money. It charges for parking to make sure there's turnover. People are getting in and out where they need to be, and again, there's spaces for people to shop, play, and use our services, right? So I just want to make sure that's clear when we talk about parking. Any questions on that?
Just to the point, this parking generally has been a place where council has taken money from that reserve, which is overfunded, to do other priorities. So, are you suggesting that we need to account for this parking to make that zero sum?
Yeah, through the mayor, and so it's more of an accounting question in the sense that right now our parking is strictly for the direct cost of parking. So the actual expenditures, the reserves, but also the operations of. What we don't necessarily account for is the cost of the land, the administration costs of the people in this room, which is where if right now I believe the number current is about $300,000 of extra parking revenue goes into our general coffers. The assumption is that's for admin costs, land costs, those type of things. We haven't necessarily put the math for that. What I suggest is that we will probably do the real math for that and make sure that parking is funded. Now again, there's a portion there that won't impact that tax levy portion that you're talking about today, because again, I'm certain there's well over $300,000 of cost that's not correctly accounted for within the parking budget per se. I love that.
Councillor Burback, I'm sorry, I'm just making some notes.
Okay, through the chair. Just talking about parking reserves. First of all, how much do we have currently in there, and would we be able to earmark some of those parking reserves to add to this reserve list balance that we see here, like money that would go towards this project?
Sorry, thank you, through the chair. I'll start with the second part of your question first. Council can certainly redirect funds from different reserves to different purposes, as a general statement, so that's always there. But if you give me just a moment, I will pull up the current balance.
But through the simple answer is yes, right? So I think what we need to do is look at parking as its own. Much like my belief, and we haven't necessarily talked about this internally, it's something to look at, but you take parking and make it more like water or wastewater in the sense that they can fully user the function, but then also put all of the assets into the parking structure. And then parking place, so you may charge over here, you may not charge over here, but it all runs with one unit, and the money you made from the downtown goes towards those other areas. To your point, the Grand Trunk site area should have some sort of revenue from those parking runs. 1.5 million for the city after service, give or take. Right.
Further questions?
And just to follow up briefly, traditionally the capital works fall to the first department, however, more recently engineering to develop project manager for the replacement and renewal of parking lots. So the funds that are in reserve could easily be used to renew those already decaying parking lots that we see today. And for example, Erie Street parking lot to provide an interim solution, we easily could use much more money to expand a full reconstruction of that parking lot and use that pretty much the entirety of that remaining plan. So
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'll touch a little bit on the University of Waterloo. Again, there was certainly back in 2009, there's feasibility studies, and the intent was there was going to be a lot more happening with the university than you see there today, per se. There was a 20-year agreement where they would have access to 8 acres of land in the downtown core. The city chose that site as likely the best site for the university. As we move forward in 2010, We transferred 1.38 acres of that land along with a commitment of $10 million. In that agreement, there was a commitment from the province of $10 million as well, and a commitment that there was other funds going to be through the university of $5 million to fund that entire project, which included both the capital bill and also my understanding of an escrow account to help with repairs and maintenance of that building for the long term. There's supposed to be phase 2, phase 3 as they moved out. That hasn't happened to date, and obviously, as we all know, what's happening with colleges and universities right now, they're likely not going to be in a position to invest more dollars into that site moving forward. And our brief conversation with them prior to the holidays was they're working on their master plan. It's going to probably concentrate mostly on their Waterloo campus. We'll have more conversations, and they're certainly willing to be a partner as we move forward. But they're not going to stand in the way of us doing what we need to move forward, and certainly we'll continue to engage with them as if there's any partnerships that make sense around anything we're doing on that site, housing or otherwise, certainly helps. But we still have 600 students going there, 150 students coming in every day, 5 days a week. Certainly a lot of them are getting bused in, but there is obviously some economic opportunities that arises from that. We've talked a little bit about some of the challenges that are happening on that front. So again, continue to work with the university and what we can do to enhance the economic and community benefit we do receive from having the university there and our original investment. But again, there's arguments to be made that our $10 million has provided us to be better well over that $10 million. Even if we should look at the matching $10 million that was invested on the province, right? So that's what's happening on the university front on that stage.
So we've had conversations then with the university that they're willing to relinquish their right to the remainder of the parcel from that agreement.
Through the mayor. So yeah, the conversation we've had with them is they're willing to continue to have conversations. They are well in tune that technically that agreement would there's no expiry date, but it contemplates a 20-year period, so it would in essence expire in 2029. And they said there's going to be they're willing to work with us, but they also understand what the city's trying to do and wants that site to move forward, and will there's no reason they like to stand in the way to do that. So do I have that necessarily in the form of a legal agreement? No, but I anticipate that's likely to make sense. Knowing where the universities are at this stage.
Absolutely.
This through the chair. Further to that, we've given them $10 million to build that building. If because of the challenges that universities are seeing, they leave the city, do we have to buy that building back?
Through the mayor, so the agreement contemplates that. The agreement contemplates that if the university no longer wants that campus, we would have the first right of refusal, or I'm paraphrasing, we would have the first right of refusal to buy that building back at fair market value, less the $10 million year.
Right.
The master plan, I'm not going to spend much time on. You presumably have seen this several times. It was built in 2018, and it still remains fundamentally a good guiding principle that I've been use that to build out what they were looking at, which really I wanted to talk to led to the guiding vision that council endorsed in 2024. There's all kinds of pieces that puzzle of that 18 master plan that are still in play today. But again, pieces have moved around a little bit and the vision's changed. But it was a really important document for us to use to move forward and the ad hoc committee to use to move forward with a lot of the engagement they've done and the recommendations that they've made to council over the last little bit. So really what I want to talk about today with council is the vision and guiding principles. And this is in your council package in the agenda. But does this still resonate? Does this still make sense, right? We've got basically the 6 pillars here, the sustainability, fiscal responsibility, celebrate the past and the future forward, inspiring and inclusion, distinct, diverse, multifunctional, connected, and community focused, and then thriving and vibrant. And again, there's in your package, you have the details in regards to what we approved in 2024 around what all of those statements mean. So I won't necessarily go through that, it's in your package, but this is your opportunity. If there's anything there that we need to tweak or change as we move forward, this is a good opportunity to have that discussion. But as we discussed last time, as we heard, the importance as we move forward with however we move forward with the site, but if we do want the private sector to be partly involved, we need to have a clear vision, and I think we have that. It's broad, there's no doubt of that, that's fairly broad, and that's something we'll work through. But from a staff perspective, it continues to make sense. It certainly is we get a lot of engagement both in 2018 and the ad hoc committee in 23-24 on this. I think it's still relevant today. But again, to council, I want to make sure we brought this back. So there was some conversation last time that we have a proper vision moving forward, and the answer is we do. But let's talk about that.
If I could just ask a question before, what, and perhaps you're going to get this later on, what goes into the definition of sustainable, fiscally responsible? Are we going to that today, or what that's might sound like? But I know that's a question that I hear a lot in the public, and then I'll turn to Council Hunter as well.
Through the mayor, on page, I think 2 of your agenda, there's this drawing, but next there's more description. So under the sustainability and fiscal responsibility, we talk about net zero carbon emissions, we talk about resilience to climate change, we talk about generate new revenues, and we talk about partnerships and strategies that serve the public.
I just had 2 comments. One in response to the mayor's question. I think what I see as financially sustainable for this parcel is that we get the right mix of where the money comes from in this parcel. We will need private elements to this parcel, residential, commercial, and the tax dollars from those elements, in my mind, should completely offset the expenditures on the public side. So if we have a new library on the site, whatever public spaces are on the site, the tax income from the private side should support the public side. And part of our job over the next little bit is to find where that balance is. And some of this is part of the challenge with this. The project is so huge. I think if we try to grab the whole thing all at once, it's going to be too much. There are going to be a lot of questions we're not going to be able to answer for quite some time. But I think we can still move ahead with something fairly quickly. And I'll talk more about that later today. But so that's what the sustainable piece is to me. That all that money, looking at that project as a whole, it nets out to 0 cost to the taxpayer. That's the goal. I don't know how close we can get to that, but that's what we're trying to do. My second comment was on the guiding principles. I think those principles have been useful because they've shaped where we are today in terms of our path. I think they'll continue to shape. I don't want to be bound by a set of principles. They're meant to be guidelines, and we'll try and hit the guidelines. They do shape the project. That's already happened. It will continue. I don't think we need to make a change unless we find ourselves bumping our heads on one of the principles that it's holding something up. Then we need to make a change. Otherwise, I'd say go ahead.
If I could just follow up on that, we've always talked about this being a triple P, private public project, and I believe as we move forward and we're maybe getting a little bit too far ahead, it's what the province brings to the table, what the federal government brings to the table, what maybe most importantly the private sector brings to the table. I know just lately on Saturday night somebody approached me and just said, what if the municipality just commit $100 million to that project and be done with it? And you have to kind of smile because that $100 million with regards to our residents just isn't feasible. So yeah, that idea about sustainability, that's I think one of the top of mind items. Turn it back to you.
Through you again, Mr. Mayor, and that's these guiding principles are really good, but they're broad. But they're broad, which allows us to really navigate what we need to do. On the flip side, there are some areas that sometimes conflict. And again, that's where when we bring forward ideas, we'll use that, and obviously, let's say we think needs to be through principles, but this principle here is, and we'll have to make decisions around that, but it's still a whole guiding document that helps us move forward. And it makes a lot of sense. And again, the important piece here, it was formulated by some really, really good public engagement, and I think that helps kind of move that forward, right?
If I may, and I might jump ahead as well, and I apologize. And perhaps this is a question for either Director Whitlaw or Director Bettridge or through the presenter himself. Where does this fit, these guiding principles, and this project with regards to our official plan review? And
through you, your worship. So the master plan recommendations have already been embedded into the official plan. I participated with the ad hoc through this process, and I think they certainly fit. So the official plan review is certainly knows what the ad hoc committee and council has seen so far. They've seen what the master plan in 2018, and the official plan review is to some extent waiting for an outcome from council. But I think what we've already got is a good foundation for policies in our current official plan. Also, 200 zoning bylaw. So I think I probably did that. Unless Director Pinchot has anything that.
Thank you, for your worship, Director.
thank you. Councilor McCabe and then Councilor
Through the chair, and sort of follow up on the mayor's comments around that. Are we contemplating a look at the overall area around the site? So not just the site itself in relationship to the official plan review, in the sense of the scaling of the community around it in anticipation of growth in that area.
Certainly. I mean, the presentation to council and the proposed or recommended and proposed changes to the land use schedule to talk about the residential lands beyond the rail line. But also what I don't want to be, it's not a whole, like, because we have what it currently looks like right now, that there are significant policies in place if someone were to come, whether the city or a private developer were to come forward with something on those lands now. We as a planning division and also a city in general know the opportunity that rests there, and our official plan review and when we're looking to craft policies for their density, whether it's lands beyond, so I'm saying further south from the downtown, so there's going to be opportunity there. That ultimately depending on what goes there, right? So
Just to follow up
Yes,
on that, in the context of the rail yards that are around there, we know that we've already had an issue in regard to CN. I don't know if we contemplate anything in regard to our official plan, or can anything be considered in the official plan when we're looking at that context for the city of Stratford. I know that the city of Hamilton has had some issues with housing there.
yeah, through your worship, I'm familiar with Hamilton or Kitchener. What we know is that the rail authorities will certainly and likely have comments. I would say that we as a city can't be afraid to move forward on that.
If I could just also add, going back to the 2018 Grand Trunk Master Plan, it did identify or does identify, and I don't think we moved away from that on page 33 and carries over to 34, the idea that looking at it both horizontally and vertically across the site and within the blocks around. So that's quick one thing to Councilor Burbank.
Through the chair, yeah, these guiding principles to me, they're things that we, as looking at the project as a whole, that we would want to hit all of them. But when we drill down and we decide, okay, so some of this land might be privately developed, some of it might not, then, you know, we could have a threshold of, you know, you need to meet at least 3 of these mandates. Or, you know, there are ways that we can drill down to make sure that, you know, all of the guiding principles are met, but within each section that there would be at least a certain number of those as well.
And through the mayor, 2 points I want to make. One is Councilor McCabe's comment that, yeah, it's very important to look at not this site by itself and how it plays as part of the bigger community, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Councilor Burback's point here is What was your question specifically?
Well, it wasn't really a question, more of a comment about, you know, that we wanna make sure, like, that the overarching
Yeah.
vision that we kind of, that the city or someone makes sure that all of these guiding principles are met, even if we're parceling it out and, you know, there are different,
Yeah.
you know, in each spot, we can't say like in residential, that it has to have historical this and, you know, like there's a time and place for each of these guiding principles to be met in different
Yeah,
aspects of the
and
project.
I know what I was gonna say now, so, and that's important as we develop, the formal market documentation that we move forward, is how are we gonna evaluate the components? And that's where this visioning will be a little bit more important. Now, if you put it all in there, and you're very strict, that's gonna restrict or make it maybe more costly of what proponents can do or won't do. But those are those guiding principles that will have to be narrowed down, that when we do put out a public document, and how we evaluate those projects are gonna be based on certain criteria, and I think parts of this visioning will be part of that criteria, and that's how we make sure of that happens.
Just as a follow-up, so that is my intention, is that, you know, that the city would have a vision for the whole thing. But we don't require each developer to meet every single one of those, but that we make sure that overarching, we're hitting.
Councillor, thank you through the mayor. I was just gonna suggest, the way I envision that is that, we're not gonna control the private segments of the project, but I think we can do is shape them. And I think that's what Councillor Verlack's speaking to, is we can shape what it looks like, how it fits into our city. And I think that's the way to think about it.
And if I could, and CEO can correct me on that, as part of the RFP or whatever process you go out to the public, that would be part of that end front.
Yes.
Directly through yours, if I can add one more piece, and I don't want to be forgotten, I think we take right that we already own this parcel. So if this was privately owned, our ability to capture what we want to see would be a lot more limited. Council is really in the driver's seat right now, because when council enters into any purchase and sale agreement, council can dictate what components they want to see. If it's privately held, council loses a bit of that ability.
Okay, perfect, that's super helpful, for us, was a big part of today, to have a conversation around that, and make sure we're still down the right path. So this kind of all leads us to, and one of the things, certainly in my view, coming in and looking at this is, and we heard this a little bit last week, or our last workshop, was these are complicated items. When you start talking about, real estate deals, partnerships, 3Ps, we've heard about 3Ps a lot over the last years or so, but very few happen because they need to be so big of projects to make sure the administration, the legal, the consulting makes it make sense. So they're not easy partnerships, right? To get all the ducks lined up and all the legal fees. So the important part is to break it down a little bit into bites, which is what we've done. And that's kind of when I wanted to speak to that is we've broken this down. We've worked with the university and did that piece. We've done the parking, we've done the transit. Now we're kind of talking about what's the next piece. And these are really the 4 components. You can break down probably a little bit more than this, but certainly in the work that the ad hoc committee did, these are kind of what resonated, came out as kind of the 4 pillars, which is the community facility, of course, and what that community facility exactly looks like to be determined as we move forward. The superstructure, same thing, but it is a component to talk about, the residential and the housing component. And then parking and mobility are really the 4 components that we have to play with around that site. And again, you can add in more, but those buckets really make some sense. It allows us to really start to concentrate our conversation, which is what we'll get into today. Last couple slides here on the first section of the agenda. I just wanted to share this. It's in the council package because you're going to hear us talk, and this comes out of the one of the original plans, but you're going to hear us talk about 2D, which is the portion in the corner where we're talking about housing. But when we start talking about some of these parcels every once in a while, I just want to make sure and refresh everybody that this is how it's kind of laid out. Just not to confuse people as we go forward. The blue piece is obviously the current structure. And we've broken this down into the other piece. Item number 3 is the YMCA property there as well. And then we don't name or number the transit hub, that's not really fun. But So I just wanted to make sure that council was aware, if we start talking about any of this stuff, you don't have about sections of the property. Specifically. And then lastly, going back to the comment about how do we look at this as a broader project other than just the one site, is we have a lot of documentation that are happening, and there's an argument to be made. It would have been a lot more useful for council to have all of these things in front of you today that guides your decisions. But regardless of that, these are the important documents we're working on as we speak. The official plan we just spoke to, and that's well underway right now. And again, I know at last council meeting, Adam and his team talked about the goal is to get this at least in front of council and passed prior to the election, then go off to the province, and then we'll see how long that takes from a process point of view, but that's well in hand. The recreational leisure master plan, which I know Tim and his group are working on the RFP for right now, and the scope of that is to be broader than just a recreation master plan. It's going to include a lot of these other plans that we have, the cultural plan, the sports tourism stuff, all of those plans to try to get everything combined. And again, this is going to help. Really, the purpose of this is here's what you have, here's what the needs are, here's what the growth looks like, which again ties into the official plan, and here's what your needs are going to look like in the future from a rec and leisure point of view. And that is bigger than just arenas. It includes the parks, the libraries, all those cultural assets as well, right? So again, that'll be helpful as we're making decisions on sizing certain community facilities or parks. This will be helpful as we move forward. And again, something else I've been touting a lot, and probably tired of me hearing this, is one of the things I think the province is not thinking about enough when it comes to the housing pieces. We're talking about building housing. As a municipality, our purpose is to provide the services that people require to live here. As housing gets denser, which is going to happen, is happening. The requirement for people to be out in parks, have community facilities like a library, becomes that more. It's going to be put more pressure on us municipalities to build those spaces. And usually, what happens is you build all the housing, and then the pressure comes down to the municipality. Okay, we need all of these extra services now. And my hope and what I'm touting is we need to think about this collectively. As we're building houses, we're building the needs as well. And this hopefully what the rec and leisure master plan starts to help us address as we move forward. The parking study I talked about, of course, is coming. We're working on an internal housing strategy right now. We're doing a 90-day sprint, so we can kind of put all of our housing, affordable housing, with a lot of work that Kim and her group are doing on the housing and homelessness plan, put all that together so we have a strategy that makes sense collectively with the OP as well. And then the asset management plan that Council College just received in your inboxes this last week that Johnny's been working on, and Carmen's group have been working on, which again helps us determine what we can afford, what we can't afford, what our infrastructure deficit looks like, and we'll be bringing that to council in March for a fulsome discussion, which again adds all of these pieces to this problem. So the timing, while some of these are a little bit out, the timing of all this is also very helpful as we develop the strategies. So that's the end of kind of the section one, to go back in history, why we're here, what we've done to get here, what we're thinking about, and everything we have. And I think as somebody said earlier in the meeting, we may not have all of the information, but the goal here is to get as much information and know what's also coming down the pipeline, so that we can make some decisions to move forward. And the other piece, like I said, going back to the other slide, we're a city that is uniquely positioned here. But as the mayor said, $100 million is not something we can snap a finger and do tomorrow, or do ever for one project. But how do we scale this and phase it in an approach that makes sense and sustainable for the municipality moving forward and helps us so well. That's what we get into next.
Through the chair, just to follow up with the discussion around the asset management plan, which is coming forward in front of us. Is it contemplated at this next meeting that we would kind of look at what this might look like folded into our asset management plan? That if we a scenario on these facilities.
Through the mayor, you're stealing our thunder a little bit, but yes, the point of workshop 3 and Carmen piece second is I've talked to Carmen a lot about how do we now take the new information we have from our asset management plan, the new information we have from our 10-year financial strategy, capital strategy, And bring that forward to the third workshop and where we can start plugging and playing as to, okay, here's where we sit today, here's what our current 10-year forecast, and maybe we'll dive into a 20-year forecast just to kind of dive that in a little bit. Once you move from 10-year to 20-year, it's not as accurate. The point is the asset management plan actually contemplates 100 years. So we have that data, and then we plug in if we invest into this Grand Trunk site X amount of dollars on this date. If we have some of these other investments we're talking about, we have already, again, we've got some investment for the library in there, we've got investments for the lands, we've got investment for the police station. We've got some information we don't necessarily know about around fire and some other things, but everything we know we want to stick in that plan, and that's the purpose of the workshop 3 is to really talk about here's what we know today, here's what we think we can afford without a huge impact on the tax rate, or here's what you can't afford, or you're going to have to make decisions about priority. And that's the point of, as I said before, the problem with this, you can't make one decision around this site in a vacuum without knowing everything else you need to do, and make sure we're looking at this from a sustainable financial perspective. And we're going to give you as much information on that as we can at the next workshop.
Yeah, as a follow-up, I just think that I can see here with the path that you were laying out that then council actually has a fulsome idea of what this looks like, and the public has a fulsome idea of what they're contemplating and decision making around it, which is really the first time that I felt that was possible during the discussion about it.
Okay, so the next piece is really to concentrate on the community facility, and here we have so the our consultant spec group has done some work. Well, one of the things that came out of council and the ad hoc committee was to do some work around the therapy facility. So we've done some work to do some costings. There's some drawings and some pieces. We got a draft report last week. It's still in draft form, so I haven't circulated for you, but we pulled out some of the drawing. And the idea here is this is not exactly meant to show you what the building is going to look like. They've had to do a bunch of work on sizing, on especially on the rehabilitation of the current YMCA building. They had to do a lot of work to understand what that cost might look like. And we then got them to provide us 3 options around costings of what that might be as we work. So again, there's some drawings and pictures in here. Don't feel that that's exactly what the building is going to look like. The exercise was to get a Class C estimate around some of these options as we move forward. Again, the shared facility piece, the important piece here is that partnership. I mean, we've had this partnership with the Y since day one, in a sense, with the library over the last number of years. We've got 2 willing partners on that front. And again, the importance of that community facility, that community benefit that brings, as I talked about, as our housing gets denser in size, the importance of these community facilities and making sure people have places to gather. They may or may not have room in their backyards. They may or may not have room in their living rooms anymore as housing shrinks smaller and smaller. So again, size and scope needs to be done, but first of all, I want to have the library come up and do their presentation from their perspective. The YMCA will come up, and then we'll talk about the actual costs of the facilities as we have them today.
Welcome to this Robinson. Now, as you go along, are you comfortable following the same protocol here? If there's questions as you speak, to entertain questions when you come up. Sure. Thank you. Floor yours.
All right, thank you very much for inviting me this morning. I appreciate the opportunity to walk council through our library's current space challenges and to share a vision on how a modern and co-located library at the Grand Trunk site can meaningfully strengthen Stratford's future. I do have a library board member in attendance today, David Matthews, and Lori Brown was here, but thank you very much for attending. So a little bit about the library. Stratford has had a long history of library service, being formally established by bylaw in 1897, and in 1992, I think it was, the library board received $15,000 from the Carnegie Foundation to build the current library building, which opened in 1903. 2 additions have been made to bring the library to its current size, one in 1926 and one in 1975. SPL is a very busy downtown hub. 1/3 of Stratford residents have library cards that they are actively using. Over 500 people visit the library each and every day, and they borrow over 400,000 items. And that's what it was last year, and so it's very busy. SPL employs 40 employees. We work with over 100 volunteers and have partnerships with dozens and dozens of organizations. SPL does a lot. Beyond being a repository of books, SPL provides a wide range of services and programs to help Stratford residents meet their information, educational, entertainment, and in some ways, very basic human needs. Who uses the library? A lot of people. We have just under 12,000 active library card holders, and this number has grown by 13% in the last 5 years. 16% of card holders are classified as youth. However, we know that number is much higher because many kids come with their caregivers and parents, and they just use one card for these. And who uses them? Uses the library. Card holders are pretty evenly spaced across the city, as you can tell. You can tell those are all little dots. There's about 9,000 dots who have used their card in the last 12 months. So Stratford loves their library. And every dollar spent on the library is a well-spent investment. This is the 2024 Gold Value Material Library Toolkit report that was shared with you last year. And it shows that for every dollar invested by the municipality on the library, there's a $6.64 return on investment for every dollar. And that totals over $19 million. That was for 2024. The 2025 report will be coming to you in the coming months. Note of all that the library does, we are most proud of the fact that it drives community and connection. And I will say that we like to think we're pretty excellent at that. But community use has outgrown the current library building, and in 2023, the library board gave a priority to finally address the library space problem. And I'm not going to stand here and go through all the different space issues. You've heard me talk to them before. And they have been studied. There's a Benton report that was from 2003 and another report by LeMay in 2022, which reported all the different issues that we have. But very generally, there are logistical constraints. We have to have additional staff because of the layout of the building. There's significant accessibility issues, very limited parking. We literally have 4 parking spots on our property. There's substantial challenges in servicing so many different types of people and their needs in a very small space. And the list goes on. And unfortunately, the corner plot of land that the library sits on and the structure of the current building prevents the library from being used. And as a recent library patron shared with us, Stratford Library is wonderful, but Stratford is too big for it. The space standard for library buildings is generally 1 net square foot for every person in the community's population. So right now we're net 12,472 square feet. But if we're to be 1 square foot per person in the population, right now we should be at 34,000. And when you plan for a new building, you want to be planning for 20 to 25 years out. So that shows where we should be planning for. And there's a bit of a deficit there. We're operating at less than half the space recommended for a community of Stratford's size. But Stratford's population has more than tripled since 1903 and continues to grow. And like other municipal amenities, the library needs to grow along with it. And the good news is that Stratford has a rare opportunity, not just to expand the library, but to reimagine what a modern library or modern public service hub can look like. And as we requested back in February 2024, the library would like to be an anchor tenant at the Grand Trunk site. We envision a new library sized for the next 25 years in a community facility with community partners such as the YMCA. By co-locating with community partners like the Y, we can share space and reduce our square footage needs, potentially up to 20%. In an accessible library, one that has entrances, stack heights, aisle widths, restrooms, parking spots, all consistent with AOTA standards, designed to, the space can be designed to anticipate rather than to react to accessibility needs. SPL currently has 62 chairs in our library for the public to use. And some of those are beanbags. We plan to increase this by approximately 400% to over 200 seats. And for community Stratford size, 200 is the minimum for two library standards. A new library would include bookable meeting rooms, perfect for those looking for a place to study, to work remotely, or for social agencies to meet with their clients. This is something that we're asked for daily. There would be greater engagement space. This would be flexible space for programs, events, community bookings. Perhaps more performance space for artist groups like the Stratford Arts and Culture Club. The space would be inclusive for all members. A reflection space, a space for new parents, a sensory room. There's a quote at the back of my report, you may have noticed, where a parent had mentioned to us that they wished SPL had a sensory room so they could actually bring their child to the library. And looking at the Your City, Your Future event feedback, we heard over and over again from teens that they're looking for a place to hang out, one where there are no fees. When asked about a library specifically, they said that they would love a space that is inspiring, fun, and welcoming. But they also said they wanted a quiet space for those who don't have it at home. Also, they asked for a place with more teens so that they can meet outside of school and combat loneliness. And that wasn't us writing those quotes, that was them saying loneliness. Adequate parking at libraries is crucial for ensuring accessibility, increasing visitor attendance, and supporting community services. Many visitors who visit SPL are young families and elderly who require accessible and convenient parking. And as a public institution, libraries have a responsibility to be sustainable in their design. The library will be built using sustainable design principles with an aim to be carbon neutral or better. So our vision is partnering, as I already mentioned. Libraries partnering with other facilities is a well-established practice and has a vast number of benefits for everyone involved. So thinking about partnering with the YMCA, it's not merely about sharing space. It's about creating a purpose-built civic hub where learning, wellness, community connection, and public service come together in one facility, making the lives of Stratford residents easier. This model removes barriers for people who struggle with transportation, mobility, or cost. Families can attend a swimming class, join story time, access settlement services, or use digital resources all in one trip. Think about what this could look like for a single mom with 3 kids. Drop the kids off at swimming lessons, walk across the hall, and then they can access the library for settlement services, job research, whatever their purpose might be. There's no second trip, no extra transportation costs, and no barrier. Together, the YMCA and the library can create a safe, supervised, and positive environment for young people. After school, youth can transition easily between study space, sports programs, leadership activities, or just a safe space to be themselves. This partnership can help reduce isolation, offer meaningful alternatives to high-risk activities. The shared facility needs shared spaces and shared services. We can reduce each of our capital and operating costs by working together. There could be shared program and meeting rooms, shared lobbies, washrooms, mechanical systems, joint custodial and maintenance staff, and operations. And a lower capital construction cost due to a single build. These efficiencies translate into long-term municipal savings and more responsible use of municipal tax dollars. And working together, both organizations can offer programming that we can either provide alone. Collaboration could include health and literacy programs, technology and wellness sessions for seniors, newcomer family recreation nights, and early years literacy paired with active play opportunities. And a modern multi-use facility is a proven catalyst for neighborhood revitalization, foot traffic, and local economic activity. The library is ready to deliver one of the highest social returns on municipal investment, and pairing with why it strengthens that impact even further. So when we talk about libraries, we often talk about books, which are a big part of us. But when researchers talk about libraries, they talk about it through the lens of social infrastructure, the essential spaces that hold communities together. This here is the YMCA, new YMCA library combination in Vaughan. It's very beautiful, big location. Be nice to have that much space, but I think it's about 140,000 square meters. It's quite large. Social infrastructure is critically important for municipalities, especially for those whose value, for communities who value belonging and inclusion as Stratford does. Investing in places where people naturally gather is investing in the resilience of Stratford itself. When people regularly share public spaces, they develop the relationship and trust that help a community function, especially in times of crisis. Oh, I have a feeling I am one slide behind. Yes, I apologize for that. So investing in places where people naturally gather is investing in the resilience of Stratford itself. When people regularly share public spaces, they develop a relationship and trust that help a community function, especially at times of crisis. We saw this during the pandemic when thousands of residents came to our library to figure out vaccine passports. They trusted the library as a place that they could go for help. Communities with strong social infrastructure demonstrate better public health, stronger civic cohesion, and faster recovery after crisis. Social infrastructure is the most cost-effective investment a municipality can make to ensure every resident, regardless of income, have access to the tools that they need to learn, work, and thrive. Libraries provide free access to technology, internet, learning resources, and community programs that many residents cannot access otherwise. They serve newcomers, job seekers, youth, seniors, families, meeting each of these groups exactly where they are without any barrier or stigma. And in a time when affordability challenges affect many Stratford residents, the library is one of the few remaining places, if not the only place downtown, which is free, inclusive, and universally loved. And investing in social infrastructure means strengthening local economies and community well-being. Social infrastructure, like libraries, attract people to neighborhoods, support foot traffic for local businesses, and increase the overall desirability of a community. Libraries are high ROI investments. They improve literacy, workforce readiness, digital skills, and social connection, all of which directly contribute to the economic health of a community. A co-located library YMCA amplifies this effect by uniting youth learning, wellness, and community engagement all in one location. And lastly, we believe that a new community facility checks off many of the guiding principles for the GTR, especially in keeping the GTR a thriving, vibrant, inspiring, and inclusive space. In short, a new community facility allows us to deliver more value, more opportunity, and more community benefit than either the library or the YMCA could do on their own. If this project does not move forward, the library space issues are not going to go away. They will just simply grow, and the residents of Stratford will continue to. This project is an investment in the well-being of every resident, from early learners to seniors, from newcomers to long-term citizens. It's a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-a-generation opportunity, and Stratford residents deserve it. Thank you, and if you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you.
Councilor Butcher, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the presentation. I'm sold on the concept. What will help me make a decision is more hardcore numbers. I know I saw the building estimates, but what will be helpful is I'm guessing we're going to need to buy at least a few more chairs. Do we need extra staffing, things like that? Yeah, I don't know if you have it over here, but I would like to see us make a decision on this by April 27th, if we could get it. get enough time to make that decision. That would help me.
I will let, one thing we have done is, for sure, is the staffing estimates. With a library which is designed efficiently, we know we don't need more staff. We are highly staffed because of the layout of this current building. And we don't anticipate our operational costs to go up. But that, I think you think that.
Thank you through the chair. Yeah, in the package that we got, there were some of those numbers and like the square footage estimates and like cost sharing versus having a standalone library. So I think some of those numbers are there already. And certainly, as Councilor said, there's no doubt about the value of what the library brings to this community and the fact that we need a larger space. So I guess my question to you would be, what do you see as the next step in this process?
For us, it would be nice to have a commitment so we can start planning to start fundraising. We anticipate it's going to require a significant amount of community fundraising. We hired this past week somebody to be our fund development and advocacy person to help us move fundraising and donations forward. We already have had somebody come to the library and say that they have a 6-figure donation that they'd like to make, but we need a commitment.
To follow up on that. Yeah, and that being on the library board, I know some of these things that, you know, we've been working on a plan and discussing. There's not a question that the library needs to grow. It's just that the board now needs commitment from us, if this is going to be the location, that we would have you as a partner with the city. The other thing to point out, even if this isn't the site, the library will need to come to the city to talk about where this is going to happen, and to be able to have a cooperative building where we work together, it does bring costs down, and the numbers are given. So, and I'm trying to think back to other meetings, and I'm pretty sure that at some point I did put forward a motion for staff to look at putting together an MOU for the library, that we would have that. But basically, that's the commitment that we need. And I don't know where that stands, or do I need to make a motion? Is this the moment to make that motion so that the library can have a commitment on how they want to move forward?
I'm gonna let the CAO company know now.
For the mayor, yeah, no, and I think the purpose of these workshops are to get council to a point where you can make some motions, whatever those motions are. Again, that's going to be at council, and we'll have some recommendations around that for that April meeting. So certainly you're welcome to make any motions you like at this point in time. Our goal is to give you all the information to make all of your motions and decisions in April.
Yeah, to that end, what I would like to see today that we do is tentatively commit to a combined wide library, pending like a more accurate costing. I run very loose numbers. I think we could build a library in a Y, and I think worst case scenario for us would be that nothing else comes on the site. So we would be on the hook for the entirety of the library in Y. I think a 10% tax increase would cover that, hopefully better, and that I think is our worst case scenario. I think that there is a real opportunity to get provincial and federal money, and I do think we will activate the private portions of the site, which will eventually bring the tax dollars in. So worst case scenario, we could live with this decision. I would like to see us tentatively commit to both of them. Again, pending further investigations, and that we be prepared on the April 27th meeting to make a firm commitment to this. I've spoken a number of times about the enormity of this project. We're going to need to take the first bite. I think this decision would put us in a place to make the site more attractive to private developers. It's certainly going to excite our community, I think, to see something finally get done. And we're always gonna have imperfect information when we're making these decisions. You know, the outstanding plans would be lovely to have them now. But if you look at the trajectory, the 2018 plan got sidelined by the COVID pandemic. And then housing needs changed. That ball is always going to be in motion. We need to make a decision and commit and jump in. And it's a bit of a leap of faith, but I think if we take the jump and we crash, it's not catastrophic.
Is there a motion there with regards to the co-location incentive or?
I'm happy to make that motion.
So through Mayor, my recommendation, because this is the committee of the whole meeting, no decisions were made, my recommendation would be to hold any motions for the future meeting, so that way we have proper communication around the public.
But what I would like is everybody be prepared that at the April 27th, we're gonna make a decision, yay or nay.
Thank you. Yeah, clerk, I saw Councilor Burr back there hand first and then we'll go to Councilor McKay, go ahead.
And through the chair, I do believe it's time for us to make a commitment to the library because they've done their due diligence for up to 3 years on this project. And they really need to know whether we're gonna go ahead or not. I get the feeling that we're ready to do that with the YMCA. They already have an MOU. And I would remind council too that an MOU is not a firm commitment. It is a commitment of sorts, but it provides flexibility as we get more information to be able to adjust that. Another thing I'd like to point out too is that the library does bring some assets with them in the form of the building, as well as DC funds. So you know there are some assets of a few $1 million that would go towards offsetting some of the tax increase that come along with the building a large library. But that said, again, my point would be that we need this for our community, whether it's at this site or somewhere else. The city is going to need to make this kind of investment in the library. So why not here and why not do it in a spot that makes so much sense?
Councilor McKay.
Through the chair, in the discussion, and I know the costs that we're contemplating on the various different build outs here. I'm not as concerned about the build out, I'm concerned about the long-term operational costs and the asset management costs that get added into that at the end. That's why I think we need that. And whether we're contemplating whether this becomes an asset that is taken over by community services, how are our staff involved with it, is the why, you know, the maintenance agreements, all of that sort of stuff is the missing pieces for me that give me pause on making a decision. So if that's part of the next meeting, I think that we do have enough information to make a firm decision.
Further comments, Councilor?
Yeah, through the mayor, to Councilor McKay's point, when I did my kind of very rough calculations, I did factor in asset management, and I bumped up. I made an assumption that the operating costs would bump up. If we sell the existing building, those operating costs go away with it. So it's an increase, probably a bit, but maybe not huge. I think we can do this, but that is the information we need to get back to confirm, and I believe that's in the works.
CL, go ahead.
Yeah, through the mayor, as a former treasurer, of course, one of the things you would have probably heard me say, if any of you were in the room back in 16 and 17, where I had a little bit of input into the 2018 plan, was exactly that. It's easy to find capital dollars. It's more of a problem to find operating dollars. So I certainly appreciate those comments that I'm hearing from council, because that's an important piece that a lot of times gets forgotten. We have, certainly Chris and I have talked about that. Are we going to have the full exact details? No. And what you're going to hear from us as we go through is I've already heard council say a little bit about commitment, what maybe that financial commitment looks like. But once we have those commitments, there is, as Councilor McCabe stated, a lot of work ahead of us. And it's one of our slides later on of all the details we need to quickly work out as we move forward. We'll have some information at workshop 3 that is again high level. And then if decisions are made to move forward, then we have a few months of work ahead of us to decide and figure out all of those components. And operating costs are going to depend on several factors. Is it a renovation? Is it a new build? Is it in the superstructure, out of the superstructure? all of those things are gonna impact what those are, and we need a lot of work to do, but once we got a commitment. Then we can really dive in, instead of talking about Class B and Class C estimates, we can really start talking about Class B and Class A estimates from a structure point of view. And how it's gonna operate, and who pays for what, how is it made up, who owns what, those type of components as we move forward. But again, I would really appreciate the conversation I hear about those concerns, because that is something that often is left aside. And then tax increases go up significantly, not to be built an asset, but because now we have to operate an asset that's bigger when we come.
Any other questions for Ms. Robinson at this time? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming forward, and also for what you do on a daily basis. Start on language. But this time, we're gonna invite the YMCA to come forward. They'll make their presentation, and then we'll take a short break, following that of council, the staff, the audience, to set that. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, thanks to Andre and the staff for having us here today, and the council for having us a little bit of time as well. Our CEO, Mike Ennis, was hoping to be here today, he's actually stuck in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. So he's safe, he's good.
Yes.
We're gonna flight home. I just wanna say just such a good job presenting, I felt like I could have just stand beside you and been like, you know. Just the benefits of the library and why, and what we're gonna talk about today, I think we're pretty aligned on, so good job by you. So we're thrilled, this is such an exciting meeting to be here today to give a little history of the Stratford YMCA. We're gonna review some municipal partnerships, including one within our Y, we already have, and reiterate our need for a new facility here in Stratford. The Y has always been a part of the Stratford community. We've been serving in Perth County for a long time, over 150 years actually. The Y first began operating in the downtown core in the late 1800s. And in October of 1904, opened its first building, you'll see that on the left, at the corner of Downey and St. Patrick. That facility served Stratford also for more than 60 years, like the one we have now. In its final years, it actually needed wooden timber supports on the side of it to keep the building steady. Our current facility, Stratford Y on the right, opened in 1968, in November. The conversations then too were about capital and funding, and the board of directors had to choose between building a gymnasium or a community pool. Due to the demand for a community pool and swim lessons, they chose the pool. In the late 1970s, the Y was able to raise enough funding to add a gymnasium, running track, fitness area equipment, and structurally, the facility has looked largely the same ever since. One thing that has not changed is we are a charity in Stratford. We provide financial assistance to anyone who cannot afford a membership to any of our centers, and that's the same across our entire region. It's exciting to be here and to be talking about a new community center, but it is not a new conversation. Most of you know. Something we've been working on for almost 10 years now, the city. Plans were drawn up. As mentioned earlier, funding was starting to take shape. There was a change in government, followed by a pandemic, which halted all momentum on this project. When we came back to the table after the pandemic, our Y and our community looked very different than it did in 2017. In 2020, for us, our Y became part of the YMCA Three Rivers, which for us provides the much needed support for a project like this. We think about philanthropy, capital. Our services have also changed and expanded. Andrea is here with me today. She's our Chief Operating Officer. We also have Adrian Lebetchko, who's our VP of Assets and Capital. So just to show some of the resources we have now in the YMCA Three Rivers. And Andrea's going to talk a little bit today about when we look at the services we offered in 2017 and the services we offer in 2026, what has changed?
Yeah, it's quite different, so thanks, Jay. And Chris, I love your slide about the library does a lot. I'm like, we gotta steal that. The Y does a lot, which is kind of some of the pieces that Jay and I wanted to share with you a little bit today. So often when people think of the Y, the first thing that comes to mind is health and wellness. And we do serve over 1,800 members here in Stratford and offer 300 swim lessons. But we really invested a lot over the last 5 years in this community in partnership with the city in expanding our community services portfolio. So childcare is actually the biggest service area for our Y as a whole. And within Perth County specifically, we are the largest childcare provider. There's no secret that childcare is a huge need across all of our communities, and we continue to have daily conversations actually in all the communities that we serve about how we might be able to open up more childcare, increase the number of spaces that we have. We also have been operating the Early On program here in Stratford. Actually, Jay and I were whispering at each other, Andre, when you were talking about parking, because we both had to park at the Cooper site today because there's no parking at the Y because there's the Early On program there this morning, which is awesome. And we're so happy about all of the just families that's bringing into the Y space and what that means and what that looks like. We also offer immigrant services, settlement services. We have that both within our Y location, but we do it also out in the community, and specifically within schools as well. We offer settlement directly in schools and help youth get the services that they need in their school. And actually, it's interesting, we've officially outgrown the building. We have now started offering, this is hot off the press, within the past couple of weeks, employment services. And we looked to see if we could do that within the current building that we have, but we just don't have the space. So we are renting on Waterloo at the post office, some space there, and we're now offering employment services in the community. And then youth programming is another area that we've been really focused on and dedicated expanding in Stratford since the pandemic, and we've got some interesting programs happening both in the evenings, but also a program called Back on Track, which we recently started. I know people can visit, I think it was last week actually, from some folks to see what that program is all about, which is in partnership with the school boards. We offer a location for youth that have been suspended from school to come to the Y for the day and work with some of our team there instead of being at home while they're suspended. So all that to say, we have really taken a holistic look at our services as a Y and have done as much as we can to really help the Stratford Y and the Stratford community become sort of that hub, and that Krista really sort of talked so beautifully about and what that looks like. So yeah, so James got a couple of more specific building examples around the partnership piece that we're going to talk a little bit about next.
Yeah, and it's been one of the major benefits we've seen during unification is that we now have a vast experience partnering municipalities. So Mike Ennis, our CEO, he was here today. He was going to talk about these two locations. Both of them, he helped the relationship with the municipality build, open them. On the left is Stony Creek in London. That was built in 2010. The size of that facility is 66,000 square feet. It includes a public library partnership, pool, gymnasium, fitness area. Looks a lot like what we've been talking about here in Stratford. The total project cost for that facility is $30 million, which is approximately 41 with inflation today. The municipal contribution was 18.5 million, so it was 66% of that bill. The Y obviously raises money, puts in money as well, and then what has been mentioned earlier is the ability to attract innovation as well because of that. On the right is StarTech, built in 2018. This is a YMCA in London as well. This is a much larger facility, so this would resemble sort of what we're looking at building right now in Stratford, along with the Rotary complex. So you're talking about 175,000 square feet. YMCA, library, multiple ice pads, far bigger facility than what we were talking about. Total project cost of that is around 55 million, about 66 million. municipal contribution in London for that project was 42.8 million, municipal share was 79%. And then we have an example of a municipal partnership within YMCA Three Rivers. So this is the Sword Family YMCA. This opened in October 2011 in the west end of Waterloo as that area started to really expand. That facility too includes a swimming pool, fitness center, gym, and the John M. Harper Branch Library. We get to see firsthand the partnership of the library can look like. Shared space, shared utilities, shared corridors that create a fluid, community-focused environment. You can picture, I had two boys, taking one to swim lessons while the other is in the library. And there's actually, you can see a hallway there where you can see your child in swim lessons while you're in the library. Pretty special. That facility also is about 60 to 78,000 square feet. Total project cost for that in 2011 was 22 million, should be about 30 million today. The municipal contribution was 9.5 million, which was a share of 43%. Like I said, this being one of the libraries we operate, you see the first hand benefits of co-location of the library and YMCA, offering seamless shared space, shared traffic flow, and a unified community hub. The relationship of the library and the municipal operating agreement, that operating agreement I think is something that's been spoken about today. That branch is our most successful branch from a financial perspective within YMCA. It was built at a tight budget, it's not too big, and it only has undergone an expansion over the years when that need has been born. Highlighting the real impact strong partnerships, the right square footage can have a long-term sustainability and community reach. So really important there. This is our last slide, and an important moment to reiterate why the new YMCA in Stratford is essential. Our current facility is at the end of its life cycle, and many residents are already relying on alternative facilities such as the Pyramid Recreation Center in St. Mary's and the Wilmot Recreation Center just past New Hampshire, particularly for swimmers. We've spoken to both of these providers and can estimate 150 to 200 families from our communities drive out of town for their children to take swim lessons, something that we call a life lesson. We also know that that is not an option for getting families. A new bill also presents a critical opportunity to address Stratford's childcare needs, including the creation of 88 new childcare spaces. We continue to see the demand, we see waitlist growth, highlighting how significant that need in our community has become. As we continue this work, there's also the possibility of additional partners joining the project where the fit is right, strengthening both the model and the impact. And I know a few folks from SAC are here today and whom we spoke about flexing multi-use spaces. And there's other partners that would be interested as well. Most importantly, this project allows our facility to match who we are as a charity. We partner, we're nimble, and we respond to the community's needs. We are not the building of the YMCA of 6 years, not anymore. We're building a facility that aligns with the way we now serve Stratford. Through collaboration, shared spaces, and services that increasingly extend well beyond our walls. Thank you.
And I think I'll just kind of end by on behalf of Jay and I kind of expressing our commitment to this project as the Wise Three Rivers. I know Jay and I often talk about the relationship in this community with the city, with the community partners. This is a pretty special one. We don't see it across all of the municipalities that we serve and that we work with, and so I think there's a real unique opportunity here. And we're excited, we're committed, and really just grateful to be able to share this perspective.
Questions for the YMCA? Councilor Hunter.
Yeah, through the mayor. One of the things that will help me in looking at costing this is if you've got some models from existing facilities about how the cost sharing arrangements work, and if we could get some even loose projections of what those costs might look like, that would be helpful.
We can take that away. We have a bit of both, like in terms of Jay shared some of the numbers about a few of the build examples, but I know even just the operating examples, how those work with future capital investments on both sides. Yeah.
Anything further? Councilor Kate, go ahead, please.
Thank you for the presentation. Certainly the numbers and percentages that you're laying out are making me feel a little bit happier than the ones that I see in our mixed facility operational models here, where you're looking at, a municipal contribution of 75-78%. I like 44, so if you can step back with that would be terrific. But it's good to see that you're thinking through, and those other models were helpful to see.
Anything further, Councilor Burbank?
Thank you through the chair. Just want to thank you for what you do for our community. It's really important, and you're an important partner to us. And I just want to emphasize like how important the childcare piece is, because if we want to increase density in our city and we want to attract young families, we need to expand childcare, and this is an excellent way to do it, and it's a great location. So, thanks for hanging in there, and and we'll hopefully get something moving forward soon.
Other comments, questions? Seeing none, I know if Mike was here, and I feel sorry he's stuck in Mexico, but he would say, and you certainly showed this at the beginning this morning in your presentations, the YMCA is much more than a gym and swing. It's a community facility with all the things that you mentioned. So on behalf of council and staff and audience, thank you for your presentation. Having said that, we're going to take a short break, and then we'll reconvene. So let's we aim for 1:45. Okay, please, thank you. fighting for being very close to the appointed body. And I'm going to turn it back at this time to CAO. Mr. Moran, whenever you're ready, I believe we're at 5.4.
Perfect, all right, thank you very much, for the presentation, I think that was very helpful. Reminder, I think a lot of that you may have heard already before, but again, very helpful reminder, and again, a little bit of new information as to why we built the project. In regards to looking at this shared civilian positives that we see on it. So next we're gonna get into the costs, and again, I want to remind council today, we're gonna talk about the costs. So we had Spec Group as our main consultant, engaged by the ad hoc committee or with the ad hoc committee about a year and a half or so ago. They used Super Cool, which is the architects involved to do some design work as we move forward. BTY did the costing, and then WSP, which you heard from at workshop 1, and worked with the city on several occasions on the environmental side, provided some of the environmental information. So as we move forward, I'm not going to be the expert here on where this that we wanted them to speak to this. They're not available today, and the final report's not necessarily yet available. Having said that, it does give you some general guidelines as to the quantum of the cost side, and then at the next meeting we have a couple of options. One, if we need to bring them in to dive into the cost, to really understand the nuts and bolts of how those costings came up. But I think what I'm hearing today is more important to talk about. Here's our growth costs that we have them today. Let's look at the operating side of the cost structure, and then obviously the revenue side of the structure, which is us as well. So we can deal with that as we move forward. So again, forgive me if I can't answer the specific questions today, but we certainly can take any of that back that council may have. These are just some of the examples that will be in the report when we get it, which are examples of some of the facilities that one of these groups that I just mentioned have worked on in the past. Again, you've seen actually both the library and the YMCA has some really good examples as well. So I won't get into any of the details. The point is, this is not a new concept, it's a concept that's tried and true, and it is working in several fronts of these shared type of facilities that come together. So there we go. So the first one, which was probably the more complex one of the options, was when we put the buildings inside the current envelope of the current structure. So in essence, is a renovation. And when we talk about these numbers in the construction world, these are what we call Class C estimates. They're probably between 15 and 25% plus or minus. Class D estimates, which is what we'll talk about in a little bit, are certainly 25 to 40%, certainly not as fine-tuned. As we get closer to a real design, real project, you start looking at Class D and Class A estimates up to the board. Steve's probably way more intelligent than that than I can. But just so you know, these are what we call Class C estimates, so plus or minus 15 to 20% or so. So to do the renovation project, add on to that facility, the blue section would be basically the new construction side. The yellow section is in essence the current piece and upgrades that would require on that site. Creates a 70,000 square foot building altogether. Both the library and the Y have been involved in 2, at least maybe 3 meetings with the consultants just to talk about certain things around this. The estimated cost for that is $50 million. Again, there's some costs in here we need to still account for, servicing if needed, and some other pieces. But yeah, as a rough number for discussion purposes, Class C estimates around the $50 million mark to renovate in place. The one challenge with this concept, of course, is, as you can see, where the library blue piece, there's a triangle, takes up all of where the current YMCA parking is taken up. So then you got to think about where's the parking and how is that parking specific to this building work out in regards to the current site today. What does that take away from public parking that's there now? So again, that's one of the things we have to consider. The other area, and then we have a pointer. Yeah. This area here is, in essence, the childcare side and the 890 spaces that we talked about earlier as well. So again, a lot of work's been done on that front. Again, to start looking at this a little bit closer. The report itself will have a little bit more information as you see it, but this was the general concepts that our consultants worked with for the site and the constraints of the sites to rebuild this. Obviously, a lot of new additions here. Having said that, there's still the old structure in place that would be here in regards to this case. Some shared spaces in yellow here. And here as we look forward, again, it doesn't mean this would be what the final design work, but put something together that made some sense for all parties and to get a true costing on it. This is kind of what was come up with if we were to renovate the building on site. The next option is when we took the space needs that the Y have, take the space needs that the library has, and some common spaces. What would it look like to build a new structure at 100,000 square feet, which kind of deals with all of those space needs that we talked about. Again, not a lot of work here done on a design per se, but the best and most efficient way to do it is to build a box in a sense. And if you really take a look at the university, it's a box, but it's done in such a way that looks proper, looks nice, fits the area. But for this purpose is if we built an efficient box at 100,000 square feet, what does that look like in shared facility? $65 million is what that number looks like. The two spaces that were contemplated were right beside this here is the library or the university building now. Again, in this space here, obviously the other space is right behind the university. Inside the superstructure, what does that look like? Does it fit? Would it fit? And does that make any sense from that perspective? Obviously, from an operational standpoint, both the Y and the library do not prefer a space here. Regardless of that, we want to see where the thing might fit, and that location is not a decision point that we need to make as we move forward. But it just shows that the site should be a couple of different options. Those options have a little bit of different costs to them. In regards to the environmental side of things. Having said that, the cost here is about $65 million. And then the third option is exact same. If we were to build new on site, same type of spots, but to fully compare it to the renovation, let's use 70,000 square feet as that number that maximizes that space, but also gets it into a space that is comparable to. Oh, sorry. This is option two. We just kind of have another couple of designs here. Which I won't, it's in the report. So option 3 looks at new but 70,000 square feet. What does that look like? And that allows us to maybe 2 floors, not 3 floors, which again goes back to the operational side of the cost is at 47.3 million. And again, very interesting piece here at using these estimates as we could say virtually the cost to renovate and the cost to build a new on site are virtually the same. I mean, a couple $1 million last year, but again, there's some nuances with both of those options. For example, if you renovate, what do you do in regards to current operations and how does the Y continue to operate if there's a massive renovation happening? There's a way you can work with that, but again, there would be pause in service in regards to that, and there's a cost to moving that service somewhere else in the meantime. On the build new side, certainly it's fresh, it's easy, it's easier to do. But you have obviously lose out some department credit side of things to using when we're doing the buildings are constructed and as we go through. So the purpose of this exercise, which council endorsed back in 2025, is to come up with some numbers. And these are what the numbers look like at this point in time, which are not necessarily far-fetched from what we looked at. We heard some numbers around inflation from what we heard. The numbers we had in 2018 to put the building in the community building in the superstructure were around the $50 million mark. Again, if you inflate that, depending on which inflator you use, the construction price index has almost doubled since around 2015-16. There was a few years there where we had double-digit increases. So again, be careful which estimators you're using. Having said that, the point is the costs, these seem reasonable from what we've seen in the past as well. So, any questions about those three at a very high level?
Through the chair, you mentioned the environmental cost being slightly different. Obviously, if I'm looking at number 3, it's my favorite option at this very moment. Is there a big environmental difference possibly on to this side of the University of Waterloo or behind the University of Waterloo building?
I don't have the specifics in front of me. I don't. It wouldn't be astronomical by any means. And it's really about going through the process. Anything to add there?
No, I would really, through your worship, depends the intent of the existing building to be repurposed or restored down as the applied cover for the existing structure. So that is a loss. However, it's a lot easier to achieve high efficiency energy savings from facilities. So the intent that makes it be a lead like the facility that would achieve those near net zero goals of the so.
Yeah, and I mean, you could also look at the parking that's contemplated throughout and having solar on there to net meter to that building and offset some of those operational costs for the building. And I'm more thinking in terms of digging under the facility and making sure that, like, is there contamination in one area as opposed to the other?
Through your worship, actually for both the renovated or the expansion consideration as well as the new one, we both have to look into the environmental impacts that exist on the site in general. The expansion to go beyond the limits of the existing site, and therefore enter into would be certain industrial land. So there would have to be a record site condition take process of both proposal options. It would likely be much less for the addition, the expansion version versus the new. But both processes would have come forward regardless for that.
Thank you, through the mayor. I'm leaning personal preference toward the new builds, and my question is the 70,000 square foot building. It's an $18 million lower build to swallow. Are we able to keep enough land reserve that if we need to expand in the future, we can add on to existing, or are we better about just going full and buy the bigger building now?
So through the mayor, as we move through this process and we start to look at what are the best options. So presumably what comes out of our April meeting is some finance around what we can afford, what we can't afford, how much we can put in. There's going to be some information around costs in general and revenue sources, but we won't have all that information. Again, as we discussed, presumably our recommendation will be to make a commitment of some type, both to move this forward and put some sort of financial commitment to it. Then that allows us to really start drumming down some potential other funding sources. But looking at, is 70,000 square feet the right number? Is 100,000 square feet the right number? Or somewhere in between? What other partners might be out there which might be able to add to the value? That you might have a partner early on that has a 5 to 10 year window, but then that space is utilized for our growth purposes in the future. Let's say you had somebody use 5,000 square feet for the first 10 years for some reason, but the idea is we only get that space for 10 years. After that, we're going to use it for our own growth purposes, for something to that effect. The point is, a lot of work to be done to figure out exactly what it looks like, what the common space looks like, what the real number looks like for both libraries, current needs, and we all again. But what happens is, here's the functional space needs we have today in a perfect world, and we always have to shrink those down a little bit based on whatever we can afford, and that's the same thing you would do at your own home for that matter. So we go through those exercises over the next number of months. If a commitment by council was made, now we have the marching orders to do all of that type of work and to come back with you. Okay, based on everything we have, we are recommending this is the cost, 75,000 square feet, this is what it would look like. And then we have a position to move forward and shovels in the ground somewhat after. So I think the idea of the concept is give you enough information to make decisions moving forward. Then you take your vision, your recommendations, where we're going, and kind of that memorandum of understanding, and we make that into a real project with all of those answers to those questions ahead of time. And again, we can do all that work ahead of time without knowing where council wants to go, and that's where the challenge is carving out the course and where do we go, how far do we take this, and that's kind of well, the purpose of this, everything we have today without spending a lot more time and effort, without knowing exactly the direction we want to take.
That's Rebecca, go ahead, please.
Thank you through the chair. So in general, like we see these as capital costs. So renovating and the existing space option 1 versus one of the new ones. Do we have any guesstimates on operating costs of renovating versus having a new build? And I mean, already climate wise, we know that probably a new build or the parts that are newer are going to be much more efficient. So is there going to be an operating cost over time difference in trying to keep an older building running versus a new?
Through the mayor, and this is some of the work we want to do over the next month, provide you some information for and then more detail as we move forward. Generally speaking, is a renovation will limit you in how exactly the space is attributed, worked on, and the new allows you to have efficient design, not from an efficiency point of view, but from an operational point of view. I think that's where the savings will be. From an efficiency point of view, I'm sure the buildings will probably be close when we start talking about heat, hydro, those type of things. You can do a lot of stuff with an old building, and again, the structure there, the sound. So it's a big enough renovation to deal with that. But it's more on the operational facility that would be interesting. And the other piece is you still have an old building. At some point, that's a problem. You need to consider what's the pros and cons of that from a carbon footprint point of view, etc. And then the last piece, which is important in this project, not from a municipal standpoint, but from our partners' point of view, if they're fundraising, I suspect they'll get a lot further along with a new build than an old build or renovation, right? And that's just speculation per se, but it is an interesting aspect as we move forward. New with a nice design, certainly. Now again, you can make that old building quite nice. And we're not going to discount that that's a really good option to take. But certainly, those are the things we will talk about as we further go down this road. If council gives us direction to move down, is just to really decipher. And again, the decision we're going to ask you to make in April is not to decide to renovate or build new. It's commit to moving this forward, and then we will do the due diligence to then come back to you and say, this is for the value, the vision, the direction, this is the right thing for us to do the recommendation we have as we do all of that actually.
Second question, more about parking. So we know that no matter what we do here, it's gonna offset. We're gonna have some parking efficiencies. So I'm just curious, if we were going that direction, let's just say this is phase 1, this is the first thing we wanna do. Is there a possibility of starting to use the existing superstructure for parking? Like just
through the mayor, So again, I think that comes. We'll talk a little bit superstructure costs there, and again, this is very high level points. Then there are obviously some plans that we've had and talked about in the future where we can use part of that site or more of the site for parking options. And I think that's very simple for us. I mean, Taylor and his group have certainly done a little bit of work on this in the past to come up with concepts that would be fairly easy to do using funding that we already have available through the parking reserves, et cetera, on that front. But you're right, that is whatever option we choose moving forward does eliminate some of the current parking that's there, and then you can make that change.
If I could, just to pick up on that comment, Councilor Burback, one of the pieces I've always suggested is the fact that we know there's a part of that superstructure that will never be repurposed, and that's the end where the fire was. And one of my beliefs is that it's an early phasing of parking, whether it's for a redevelopment of the current YMCA and or a new build, is to take that portion of the superstructure down. I think there's value in the steel there, and then have surface parking as part of where that superstructure has been removed, so we can have base parking to either renovate the existing YMCA and or to build out a new, so. We've had that conversation, I'm sure that's gonna be part of Director Craig Laws and CAO's conversation moving forward as well. Other comments or questions?
So then what's next in regards to this, to the facility itself, and we talked a little bit about this, and you've always asked a lot of questions, the capital staff, how do we pay the capital side of things? Obviously, there's what might be the city contribution, what might be our partners' contribution, and also what other partners are, again, like I mentioned, we know we have two really good partners now. As we move forward, there may be other opportunities for partnerships one way or the other. What do those financial commitments look like, and firm those up and a new standpoint or otherwise. We've got development charges, of course, what happens here is its growth. There may be opportunities. Depending on how this is all structured, yes, very easy to look at the growth component of the library, but there may be a growth component to the YMCA that is not owned by the city. But depending on how to structure this, maybe there's a development opportunity there. Obviously, provincial federal grants. This is a tricky one. The province and the feds right now are concentrating 100% on housing. The federal budget did mention community type facilities, and who knows what that might come up. The province, depends on how we steer this thing, obviously the childcare side of it would definitely have some funding attached to it, depending on how we can tie this to the whole housing components that I've talked about in the past. Again, once we've got a commitment, once we have a plan, we can start drumming that a little bit and seeing what might be out there in different forms or otherwise. And then the fundraising, and then again, whatever else can come out of some other possible opportunities, whether that's sale of land sale or buildings, those kind of things that'll come up. Determining a capital stack. But like I said before, more importantly, out of the capital stack is how does everything work, and how do the operating costs work, and how the operating agreements work, who owns what's the site logistics, and again, luckily the Y has a lot of experience with this already, so again, we're not reinventing the wheel on this front, but there's a lot of decision points that still need to make of what those agreements will look like. What if at some point in the future the library pulls out or the Y pulls out, what happens with that facility, what's that look like for that term or termination, and who pays for what? If something happens with an HVAC system that's in a common area, who pays for that? What does that look like? Or is it all owned by the city in the sense of, and then we have a large rent agreement with the Y, and that's the way they're putting the contribution is paying rent, or otherwise they come up with a large capital contribution and then it's free rent for a bit, or it's owned by the Y. There's a lot of different ways this can go. And as we get into those constructs, there's pros and cons to all kinds of different structures. We can look at all that. Obviously, the final design, the planning, the environmentals, all of those items that need to be done, the service standards. We are very different entities, but how do we have this operate as a building that the public, doesn't matter if they're in the Y side or the library side or any of our partner side, they just have one booking system, one way to get in, one person they're talking to in a sense, how, what's that service standard look like to make sure we can't have the Y open, 5 hours and then the library open 20 hours or vice versa. They're confusing. So again, what does that really look like? And again, the branding around Ministers has against sponsorship opportunities and all of these other items. So the point is, even if this council made a decision today, my point of all this, there's a lot of work that needs to happen before shovels kind of hit any ground one way or the other to determine all of these things. These become legal arrangements that you want to get all done up front, because it's a lot harder to deal with them when something happens in the future and there's no dispute resolution built in or something of that effect. But yeah, these are not new. We can certainly have a lot of templates out there, but Stratford is unique, and we will have a unique arrangement that we want to make sure that is all parties. It's a win-win-win in that situation. So again, that's the point of this is we're talking about high level now. Once we move forward, there's a lot of other decisions that need to be made, a lot of work that needs to be done to get this going forward. The last piece of our agenda today is talk a little bit about the superstructure, and this was just as part of these are Class D estimates. We wanted to make sure that we just at least had something to talk about superstructure, about in moving this forward. So we got our consultants to kind of talk about 4 different potential options. And really the first is just a very open shell, make sure everything's good to go, and you can open it up, fix the flooring, fix the concrete, or add a layer of concrete to make sure everything's safe, add some parking stalls, that type of thing, but just have an open shell about 50,000 square feet of that building is kind of option 1A. Option 1B is again very similar, except you put a real roof on top of that, so it's partially sheltered piece but no walls. Option 3 becomes what if you fully enclosed and insulated the roof and have basic facade, basic HVAC to at least make the building. From there, it doesn't include any of the internals and all of that work. But again, what's that shell look like in regards to 75,000 square feet? And then the fourth option is exactly the same, but 100,000 square feet. And what do those costs look like just with that shell across the building? In those options. So when we look at option number 1, which is again just that open shell, we can see kind of the whole building here and how much that would be, give or take 1/3, a little bit more than that. Around $10 million is that number. If you look at option 2, which is the same kind of thing, open walls per se, but for a structured roof, all overhead is around the $18 million mark. Option 3, which is take 75,000 square feet and fully enclose it, is around the $40 million mark. And option 4, to take 100,000 square feet and fully enclose it, a roof insulated, around the $50 million mark, which again makes some sense from what we've seen before. Obviously, the one question council I'm sure will have is, well, what if you take that new building you just talked about and put it inside here? You just take the, let's say, 70,000 square feet, $50 million for that, and you add $50 million for this, and is that $100 million? Not exact math by any means. And that's one thing I talked with the consultant about to provide us some information on what that looks like as we move forward. The point is, something like this doesn't necessarily, is not too far fetched from what we've seen in our 2018 master plan, where we were looking at $50 million to have a portion of the building fully enclosed and a heating facility inside. We could take inflation and cost construction price index that brings us up to the $75 to $100 million mark. We could take that number. This would be very high level rough math, but one of the things we have asked the consultants is around that question that I expected council probably would ask, which will help as we move forward. We do know it's going to be a lot more than building you on a fresh site. But we wanted to give those options to council just so we know where we're at with these general numbers. Again, what's next? And we talked a lot about this in 2025, and one of the recommendations of the ad hoc committee was to get the superstructure is going to be a very difficult facility for a council to deal with on its own. One of the suggestions and recommendations that council took was how do we get this to market to see what the private sector can help one way or the other with. So next steps likely are informally doing some market sounding around. If we are going to put this out to a market and we have certain needs that we want one way or the other, what would that look like? What do you need as an investor or provincial developer in seeing what that information looks like? Yeah, a lot of what we talked about worked out. What does that data room look like? What does that information that they need to on the whole site and our vision look like for them to be able to think about bidding or doing something or putting proposals in for a site like this in the superstructure site, but also when it gets to the other sites, pieces of the sites around private sector, either commercial or residential housing perspectives. So that would be the first next step, likely, is the informal market sounding, so we know what we need and know what the market is like. We all know the market is, give or take, not necessarily the best or not what it was a few years back. But at the same time, this is a unique site, and again, you're probably going to get a different opinion on what that looks like. Once we have that information, then we're in a better position to go out with a formal expression. Before we get there, is there other things we need to do? We need to do a little bit more environmental work. We need to really identify those acceptable uses and that acceptable vision that council will accept. We need to take a look from an OP perspective, heritage impact assessment for structure, get that done with. We need to do that rail study one way or the other now versus later. And again, there's a bunch of other things we can add to this list. But those are some of the things as we talk about superstructure and the rest of the site that we need to think about as we move forward. But I think the next step is to take everything that we have, put it in a nice package and start talking with some developers on a non-precious basis to understand what interest would there be, what information would be required, and what does the city need to do to be ready for investment moving forward. And that's not necessarily going to happen overnight, but that is probably what the next step looks like, which really aligns with where we were 6 months ago. We are obviously hoping to go to EOI. I think the intent was this spring. What I'm suggesting is probably not quite there yet, but we can start this market sound piece for sure. That's again, I didn't want to spend a lot of time on structure itself. Mostly because I would need consultants to speak to it, not necessarily yes, but I'm happy to take back any questions, happy to talk about any of that piece before I kind of middle closing my arms.
No, so thank you, good mayor. So getting the document ready for a formal expression of interest, what's a reasonable timeline to get that done?
I think we could do it fairly quickly, i.e. Weeks to 2 months with the information we have today. But I think what we heard is if you want to do it right, you want to make sure you have all of the information that people want to do and will need to see to give you a proper review provision and where the market sounding comes in. The market sounding, I think, can be done in those next 4 to 8 weeks in a sense to start getting an idea and then putting a list together. Here's what we have and here's what we need to get, and then it's really dependent on what those needs to get is. And if we need to have 3 or 4 months, 6 months to develop what those other needs are to put in that data room, which then may come at a cost, may not, depending on what that is. But presumably to do it right, I think you're 6 to 9 months, maybe 12 months, so you actually get this out formally from a market perspective. If you want to do it right, based on all of our other pieces, resources, stuff.
It's all up. Yeah, and just with the existing superstructure, I think it's enough that we have a number of options that we can include, because it is going to be one of the challenges in bringing a private developer in, is they're looking at it as how do I rent or sell these apartments with this what looks like an old industrial site right next door. The fact that we have a plan that we can react to it as needed, I think, is enough at this stage. And then what I see working is we work with those developers and see if they can do anything with the building and commercialize it. Because we'd all love to save the building if we can. And I think that should be our goal, but it's, we've got to listen to reality as well.
Thank you. Councilor Beck.
Through the chair, yeah, and then further to those comments, when we're doing market sounding, to me, it would make sense for council to have made a commitment on what we are looking for in the community center or community hub area, because would that not allow people, developers that are looking at it to say, okay, this city is making a commitment for this type of facility. So, yes, we will be next to an industrial site that still needs to be developed and is there, but there's going to be this fabulous community center right there, which would, you think, add value to what a developer would, when they're looking at it, they'll be thinking that the value would be in that commitment that we have to put that community facility in.
And through the mayor, if I take what we heard from the experts that we had on the panel from last workshop, that's exactly the point. The more certainty you can give the private sector, the better results you will get with what they can propose to those results are more financial and opportunities from that perspective. So I think that's fair.
Just as a follow-up to that, then, like, I would love to see us make that commitment sooner than later. Is there a way that we can do it for the next workshop? Is there a way that we could move up that decision process?
I'll just, and I'll let you jump in and or the portal. We did at the onset of this meeting indicate that no decisions would be made today. I think to honor that would be fair enough. I think there's a lot of work that has to be done, through staff, through the CAO's office, to bring us to April with some more solid data that we can make a bona fide commitment at that. That's my thoughts.
And Mr. Mayor, I think it's a good segue into my closing remarks, which is really about what's next. So our view with what was next was we do a workshop number 3 on April the 9th, which is kind of where we've been able to find time in council schedule. And what we do at that meeting, this is a question mark as to whether or not there's delegations at that meeting, or delegations come after the fact, one way or the other. That deep financial dive that we talked about, which I think is important for you to hear. There's a couple of ways you can make a commitment. Again, make a commitment to sign an MOU and move things forward that doesn't have a financial piece attached to it, which is what we've done with the Y. In fact, we have an MOU with the Y right now, which expires in March. Give or take, something like that. But that hasn't moved us forward. My view is you put a commitment forward that has a commitment to move forward with a dollar amount attached to it. In order to get the dollar amount attached to it, we need this bigger financial view. And I think that's the important piece of really moving this forward to the next step. Having said that, we could make workshop 3 into a special council meeting, and you can make decisions at the April 9th meeting if that's council's wishes one way or the other, or we can at least give council the opportunity to make decisions at that meeting. Whether council needs time to think about it or doesn't want to make decisions at that meeting, have the prerogative, we'll sort of set the meeting in such a way that it's a special council meeting that decision can be made at, which might make the most sense after you hear this information, which is only a month away. And then we were going to talk about, again, some of these potential revenue sources that we talked about and how that tackles that. Like some of the operational questions. Again, we won't have that all figured out because, like I said, it's going to take a decision, then a bunch of work, then another decision with all the information we have at some point in the future. And then again, what we want to do is highlight, here's all the options on how you can move this forward. That we kind of talked about today, but also other options that come about as this process moves along. So again, this is where I'm open to hearing what you would like to see out of the next meeting, workshop 3. The intent was to go after workshop 3, our next council meeting. Well, we have a council meeting shortly thereafter, but our next real council meeting that we get reports in and get all the information from workshop 3 to you would be April 27th. So my original intent, workshop 3, get all the information, take everything you've heard, put our recommendations on paper, and a decision point for you on April 27th. Have an opening on April 20th as well. That just doesn't give us time to put anything together from the April 9th meeting in a fashion. Now, April 20th could be a special meeting, council where you read your deliberations if that's something you choose to do as well instead of workshop 3. What we don't want to do is if we open this up to full 20 delegations, depending on what we get, could take a substantial amount of the workshop. And again, I think that financial component is going to take up a fairly big piece of that, which is important for you as you make this decision. So I'm all ears here as to what works best for council as we move forward.
Just as a follow up to that, my thinking, I suppose, is, moving towards commitment for the community hub, thinking about the library and the Y, and so you said the MOU with the Y hasn't allowed the city to move forward, but it certainly allows the Y to move forward. So what I'm thinking is, can we make that decision so that the library can also move forward? It's not the same level of commitment like you're saying, that we've, made the decision about this is how much we're going to spend and this is where we're going to put it and so on. But just for the sake of the library to be able to maybe separate that into something sooner so that they can more fully engage with this process, knowing that the time they spend is well spent, right? That they have commitment from the city. So I'm not saying today, but I'm saying, is there a way that we can work that in maybe before the next workshop?
I was gonna turn to the clerk to see if either prior to or on the 9th, if we have the audience, with regards to council here, we could hold a special meeting, a council meeting where we can move something forward, as suggested by Councilor Burbank.
For your trip, yes, certainly we can poll council for availability and then proceed to schedule that meeting with the limited focus of discussing an MOU for the library and or the YMCA if there's going to be expiring soon as well.
Does that answer your question, Councilor Burbank, and that's, Councilor Lee?
Through the chair, I'm quite comfortable in the way that the CEO has laid out the plan here. This is 2 months from now. This is a project that's been waiting for 25,000 years or whatever. I think we're finally getting some financial information that council can look at. I think to rush this in any further at this point is counterproductive, because I do think with delegations and with the 10-year capital plan and with further information on April 27th, we can make some decisions that our constituents have been asking for, and that the library and the YMCA can feel comfortable.
Thank you. Councilor Knight.
Yeah, to the mayor, I have to back what Councilman Cape said. We waited so long, making progress is very exciting. Well thought out process. I agree with the CEO and that's a good one forward.
Thank you. Councilor Knight.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that just from loose calculations, I think we can make it work. I'd be a lot more comfortable if I had more fulsome financial information. And what I heard is that ideally staff would like to have till the 27th to get that together. I don't think we need to rush it. I do think we are committed to at least investigating this enough and focusing the look, and we want to pull this off if we can. But I don't think we're in a position yet to sign anything today. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Anything further? Councilor B,
everybody's heard my thoughts and opinions on this multiple times, so for me, it's a great opportunity for us just to again, to get as much information as we can so that all of us making these decisions have all the information we can make a comfortable conversation and a decision. And I appreciate Councilor McCabe. We have been waiting a long time. With this guy who's been sitting here for 16 years, I've been waiting a long time. So I'm okay with taking necessary time if it means that on April 27th that we're gonna make a decision. There's not a bigger cheerleader who's gonna be sitting here eager and excited to actually make a decision. So I'm okay with waiting this process out.
Thank you.
Well, then, with that said, I want to thank you very much, and thank again all the staff that put in the efforts to kind of get us to where we are today, and then that opportunity to follow the work we put in over the last couple of years. And again, it's not. This is complicated items, and a lot of things have happened in the world. It's changed, I think, over the last number of years, in all kinds of ways that changes the way we have to think, we have to think about spending money. So with that being said, this is the way we'll try to arrange the workshop 3 as we move forward. We'll get some information out there publicly. We will also be sharing with you the full summary report from staff and their consultants as well, whether or not we have them available frequently. I haven't confirmed that yet, but I'll say that's an opportunity if there are questions around costing pieces. Again, my expectation is we're going to talk more about the revenue side, and we'll put together that slew of options for that we think are options to move this forward. At least the next phase of what this looks like moving forward that allows us to continue that momentum and getting some more done on this as time passes here. So we do have a closed session after this. Just talk about some of the legalities around the expropriation. But other than that, I will leave it at that.
So just before we go into closed sessions, if I just can make a couple comments, the energy that we started with in the room will certainly carry forward today. So thank you very much. We have engaged public, and we will continue to engage public as we move forward. I currently believe there's great uptake by staff and council at this point. It's fully understood that this project isn't an island unto itself. It will impact the city blocks from there and into the city core and beyond. And finally, I was reminded of a comment I made at our very first public meeting this morning was that we have one chance to get this right. And this was another step of getting it right. So I thank public that are here and listening. I thank staff and council for helping us journey to getting it right. Having said that, is there a motion here to adjourn into in camera? And moved by Councilor Niger, seconded by Councilor Hunter. All in favor? Only this one, only? Okay, yes, I'm sorry. And there's the item on we're hearing the confidential report. The chief administrative officer with respect to the update on the potential redevelopment of the municipal property, and it's listed there. And it involves litigation or potential litigation in three matters before an administrative tribunal affecting the municipality or local court. Moved by, I believe we had a mover, seconder, do you think? Councilor Niger and Councilor Hunter, all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Very good. We'll just take a little break as we have, I don't want council to go anywhere, but as we have council chamber leave. This time, are we back in open session? Thank you very much. And at this time, I'll turn the meeting back to the clerk.
So through your worship, turning to the reporting out of closed session. A closed session was just held to consider the confidential report of the Chief Administrative Officer with respect to an update on the potential redevelopment of municipal property. At the meeting, the confidential report was considered and advice that was subject to client privilege was also provided.
Thank you. Anything further? No, thank you. So then moving down to the next workshop date that is scheduled for April the 9th, 2 o'clock during the council chambers. Once again, I'll thank public, staff and council for an excellent workshop today, and I especially a big outreach to, I know Melanie, who just stepped out, was a big part of this, but to our CAO for bringing this together and staff involved with their input. As I said earlier, the uptake and the involvement of staff it's just amazing at this point, and we'll see more of that as we move along. So thank you on behalf of council to all involved in today prepping for today's session and presenting. So having said all that, is there a motion to adjourn today's meeting? Councilor Beatty will move, second by Councilor Burbank. All in favor? Opposed to any, that's unanimous and carried, and we are adjourned.